MidnightMaker.com.
Shh. Sorry, babe.
Welcome to the Arts and Crafts Furniture Series. Today we're going to make the Limbert Oval Coffee Table. This project can definitely be made in 2 weekends and the skill level is Advanced Beginner. This design is made by Gregory Paolini from Fine Woodworking Magazine. You can find the plans in the link in the description below. The first step is to make the templates. The ovals are made by defining the foci and using a string to follow the curve. I'll cut just outside of the line on the bandsaw and then sweeten it up with some sanding. Getting the right curves for the legs is super important, and I really need to make a drawing bow. Now we're ready to actually start working with some oak. Cue the milling montage. Underneath the top are a couple of aprons to support it. Here I am cutting the 45-degree decorative ends. The aprons are joined with a half-lap joint. Here I am cutting them with my $11 Harbor Freight pull saw, and I will finish them off with the Narix chisels. If I was going to do this again, I would use the table saw and a miter gauge. The rails join the legs with a bridle joint. This is a very strong and great joint to practice. The best way I know how to make one of these is with the tenoning jig. If you don't have one, you can easily make one. They're useful for lots of different joinery. A quick note, if I was going to do this again, I would cut the bridle joint slot first and then I would mill the aprons to fit snugly. Cleaning up the inside of the bridle joints. Once the joinery is done, you can use the templates to cut the curves. Believe me, it's much easier this way. Now it's time to glue up the panels. Selecting the right boards, alternating the grain, etc. will really take your woodworking up a notch. I optimize each board for grain and width, trim on the table saw, and run the edges across the jointer. I pre-adjust my clamps so that once I apply the tight bond too, they're easy to drop in and clamp up. The next day I can rough cut the ovals out. Staying just outside the line, then using the template, I route using the template in quadrants. Each quadrant's grain is downhill. 2 quadrants with the template on top, and 2 with it on the bottom, using a combination pattern flush trim bit with 2 bearings. For a better explanation of this quadrant method that greatly reduces chip out, check out my Stickley 714 round dining table video, which will be coming out soon. There are various ways to break the edges of your parts. Sometimes I hand sand them to give them a more antique feel. Sometimes I use a 1/8 inch roundover bit, and sometimes I use a small chamfer. It all depends on the look and feel you're going for. Like I did in the Limbert 238 table video, I hand cut the notches where the shelf meets the legs. Then I gang all the legs together and cut the notches on the sled. It's easy to dial in the fit this way. I ran out of double-sided carpet tape, so I used the masking tape and CA glue method. Both have worked fine for me. Jonathan Katz-Moses has a great in-depth video comparing the two methods. I'll put a link in the description below. I originally experimented with some arched stretchers, but I ended up going back to the standard Limbert pierced panels. The pierced panels support the shelf and give it that classic Limbert look. They are also joined by half laps. Once again, it's better to sneak up on a tight fit. Here I had to clean up the half laps by hand because I'd maxed out the table saw height. Because there are 4 holes, I decided to make a routing jig. The more attention you give to the jig, the better your results will be. I ended up getting a commission to make a second oval coffee table, so I'm glad I went ahead and made all these jigs and templates. I removed the bulk of the waste with the jigsaw and then used the template to route the piercings. The radius of the router bit gives nice round corners to the piercings. Just ignore the Morris chair base in the corner. This was the first project I got to use my new Domino on, so I was able to use the 5mm bit to join the panels to the legs. As I got close to completing the parts for the build, I started prepping them for Jeff Jewitt's Stickley Onondaga finish. The first step is to raise the grain with distilled water. Whenever possible, I try to approach my glue-ups with sub-assemblies. This allows you to do smaller, less stressful glue-ups and then put them together later. Always do a dry run of your clamping strategy before you do the real glue-up. After the distilled water is dry, I sand to 220 grit to get ready for the next step. Here I'm applying the Trans Tint base stain for the finish. I'll put a link to his recipe in the description below. The table turned out to be quite a bit higher than I was expecting, but it is also easier to eat off of for those Netflix and chill evenings. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this project. We've got plenty more arts and crafts furniture projects in the works.